Hi, today we're going to go through an onboarding as we would with a new client. That is to get you oriented with the system on a very fundamental level so that you have an understanding of the components that are necessary to successfully have leads submitted into the system and processed and then matched with a partner. And that would be a typical setup that we see with new clients where you have an input of leads and then the system will then do an output. So we'll look at all of those systems and we'll use this this example system here that you can see to look at those. The best way to kind of describe boberdoo on a very summary level, not only is it just an input-output type system, but if you visualize a timeline, you can then kind of look at the lifespan of a lead from the time that it gets created, and then when it gets submitted into the system would be the beginning of the timeline. And as you progress through the timeline, that would be the processing of the lead and then matching it, and then posting it or sending out that lead to the recipient. So that would be a real basic look at the timeline, and I'll refer to that as we're talking along here. To look at the system in the context of that timeline, getting leads into the system, the first thing that we'll talk about is sources and vendors, which are two components in the boberdoo system that are associated with getting leads into the system. First, we'll talk about sources. And to find sources in your system, you go into the settings main tab on the left. And when you click on that, you're offered the subtabs, and the one we're looking for is the source vendor settings. And when you click that, of course, in a new system, you would have no sources set up in the system, but in this one we're looking at, we have some already set up. To create a source in your system, you really have two options to look at, and they're represented by these two buttons here in the upper left. You have the source wizard and then add new source. We always generally will steer most of our new clients to using the source wizard to create sources. While the same result is achieved with both of the buttons, the source wizard offers the advantage in that it will provide you with a PDF document of what are known as your API specs. In the context of getting leads into your system, if you're like a lot of our boberdoo clients, you're using a landing page or a website property to submit leads in, and those API specs are going to be necessary in order to get that automatic submission of the leads. And so going back to the source wizard, one of the steps that it provides you with that document, and that is helpful. The add new source button is an older button, but it does the same. It does produce a source in your system, but it still requires you to manually go into this elsewhere into our boberdoo system to get those API specs. Okay, not to get too tied up in that topic, I'll go through the source wizard real quickly just so you have an idea. The idea here is that it walks you through a number of different steps in order to set up leads getting into your system. So for example, here, if we had a web property, we would want to select that web property. And then it walks you through some basic pieces of information. Let's see if we can get lucky here. So of course we're gonna name it. Right below that, the partners per lead, that's referring to a rule that will basically allow the number of times that a lead is allowed to be sold or distributed through the boberdoo system. So leaving it at one would, in essence, make this an exclusive lead, as the industry would call it. In other words, it would be only allowed to sell once and only once. If I change this to two or more, the obvious would be the case where the lead would be sold to one or more partners. Okay, and then real quickly, the lead QC is an option, not something that you have to change, but by default it's at no. Lead QC is referring to our quality control. That's basically basic data validation of your leads. We have another section in the system that's much more robust than this tool. If you really need to do some heavy validation, then that would be the way to go. Okay, so we're going to save the changes here. And what you'll notice here is after we save that change, here is what I referred to as the button for download the PDF that is the specifications for the lead type that this is associated with. So once we've managed to do that, we should then be able to go into our source vendor settings. We'll go ahead and download this so you get a chance to look at what it looks like. It requires you to put a password in. And the PDF is just what you would expect. It is all the information that you would need to give to a web developer or a member of your team that was going to integrate a web property to submit leads in. Typically, that would be a form that's on that web page. But here's your API key, as well as the spec URL where you would have all of the information related to the field data. So that's a quick look at that. To then look at that source, there should be, here it is right here, the Mickey Mouse is the one that we created here. So sources, think of sources as a pipeline into your system, and you can create as many as you need to. These pipelines are dedicated, as you can see here, to a lead type, as we call it in your system. The lead type is the set of fields that you're capturing for any given vertical. So naturally for home improvement, they would have a set of fields that would be related to, for example, the projects that might be of a home improvement, which would of course be different than in, say, an insurance lead, where those fields would be different. And that's why we break it apart into lead types. But the sources, again, like I said, are a pipeline into your system that would channel the leads in. And those sources, you can apply unique rules to any lead that comes in. So with a created source, when you go into the edit mode, I'll show you again how I got in there. It's this pencil icon here, goes into the edit mode of a source. And so these are all the rules that are available to you in order to set up a source the way you need it to perform. Sources, again, being associated with leads coming into your system, there's a lot of different business models that would account for leads coming into the system. And sources are trying to account for all those. For example, you'll notice that there's a lot of areas that and settings here that are associated with a cost of getting a lead in. Think of that in terms of if you were purchasing leads from a third party, you're going to see a lot of the settings there are offered in order to be able to facilitate that transaction of getting leads into the system through a purchase situation. If you're generating your own leads and there's not a real cost that you're associating with it, chances are you won't use a lot of those settings. Then again, you do have the option, such as this lead cost line item is where you could put a fixed price, or I'm sorry, a fixed cost associated with any lead coming through this source. Most of the other settings are pretty self-explanatory. It's certainly worth taking a look at them to get familiar with them. And if you have questions about any of them in terms of what they do and how you might use it in your strategies, we would encourage you to certainly send us a ticket, and we'd be more than happy to give you some advice or recommendations. But beyond that, that is a look at sources. We did at the beginning of this talk about sources and vendors. And the reason we also throw vendors into that mix is that they are a component that you can create in your system. And there's a direct relationship between vendors and sources that can be created. And you'll notice that in this line item here, the second line item, this vendor, this drop-down menu allows you to select vendors in your system so that that relationship can be created into the source. We'll look at vendors here in just a moment, but just do keep in mind that it's in the source settings where you create that relationship with your vendors. All right, so to talk more about vendors in your system, you can create accounts that are for your vendors. Most often we see this with a vendor that would be selling leads to you as an operator. So you would have a buying relationship with a vendor, and so you would create an account to manage that. The vendor accounts are pretty much what you would expect. For example, here, all of the contact information for that entity would be listed here. And then you'll notice that when you're in that edit mode of that account, you have some additional options on the left here, various different things. For example, permissions, that's referring to the vendor portal that is associated with the boberdoo system. In other words, your vendors, if you choose to, can log into a dedicated portal The permissions would, of course, then be what that vendor is allowed to see. So, for example, you can enable or disable views of that portal. The vendors, again, think of that as being in a buying relationship, although it's something that a lot of clients can use in different ways. But one way to kind of view the difference between vendors and clients, or I'm sorry, vendors and sources, is that we have clients that run their boberdoo system entirely with just sources and no vendors, and it operates just fine. The opposite is not true. In other words, you cannot create just vendors and have your system accept leads into the system. It would still require sources. Whether you choose to create relationships between the vendors and sources is up to you, and you would do that in the source settings that we looked at there. That covers vendors and sources. If at any point in time you need to go back and retrieve API specs related to a source or a vendor, there is a way to do that. So you'll notice we're in the settings main tab. These are the sub tabs. Near the bottom of the list here, we have the API keys and API specs. If you remember that PDF that we looked at, there was an API key listed and then the API specs. So looking at these real quickly, you do have a way to go back in and obtain those keys if necessary. So for example, if I needed to get this key, it displays right here. You would just copy it to your clipboard and then provide it to whoever needs that. Likewise with the API specs, if for any reason you needed to go in and retrieve information, when you go into that section, you notice the API actions are listed here on the left. They're listed alphabetically. And so more often than not, our clients are going after the ping post. And so listed in the P's, you'll find the ping post. And so what happens when you click on that selected action, the body of this window gets populated with the information that you would expect to see. There's one more step though. Even though this looks like a lot of really good information, you do need to still specify which lead type you want to look at. So in this example, you notice there's this list of all of these lead types, which are links. If for the home improvement lead type, you want to look at that, if you click that, then what happened is that the field data gets populated right here. So that's a very brief look at leads coming into the system. We covered the sources, which are the main pipelines of leads getting into the system, how to create them using the source wizard, or you can use this add new source. We talked briefly about the vendors and what kind of role they can play. And then we talked about the API keys and specs, which are a pretty big deal in terms of automating submissions of leads into your system. Okay, so going back to the timeline that we were talking about at the beginning, we are covering, of course, the source and vendors. That's at the beginning of the timeline, getting the leads into the system. Once leads get into the system, then boberdoo processes them, and then we'll match those leads to what we call partners. So in most uses of boberdoo, you're selling leads to partners. And so to look at that, we have a section for partners. And so these would be the entities that are purchasing leads from us or from our system. And so you have to create partner accounts. Partner accounts are really comprised of two sides, I guess you could say. And they're represented by this pencil icon and this funnel icon as well. The funnel is the lead filter sets, which are the rules that govern which leads will match to a partner. And then this pencil icon is more the account settings, managing that business relationship with the partner. We're going to first look at the filter sets. And so by clicking on that filter icon, it displays an at-a-glance view. In this case, we have one filter set associated with this partner account. And so to look at the filter set, you would then go into the edit mode. But also, I think it's worth showing you how to create a filter set, which isn't always necessarily intuitive. To do that, you'll notice in the upper left portion of the screen, there's this drop-down menu. The first step is that you want to identify which lead type the filter set is going to be dedicated to. So again, sticking with home improvement, we select home improvement here, and then this plus button right next to that drop down then creates the filter set. And so when you click that button, it opens up all the rules that you can configure for that filter set. And we'll look at some of these here real quickly. Of course, you're going to notice that there's a naming convention that you'll want to develop. And so we'll leave that to you, but that is something that you want to put a little bit of thought into, because chances are you're going to create more than one filter set for each of your partners, and keeping straight which is doing what will certainly help save time later. Lead price right below that. This line item is where you would put in, if you're selling your leads at a fixed price. In other words, you know what price that lead is going to be every time it matches to this filter set. You could put in an amount there. If you're more of a ping post operator, chances are you're going to be leaving this at 0 and letting the automation take place. But it's worth pointing out that the filter sets have a place where you can put what we call the lead price. And it's worth pointing out that if you remember looking at the source, there was the lead cost. Two very different values, and it's worth taking some time to commit to memory that anytime you're talking about a lead cost, you're talking about a value associated with getting a lead into the system. In most cases, that would be a lead cost would be how much it cost you to purchase that lead in order to get it into the system. Then when you start talking about the lead price, that's going to be the amount that your partner pays in order to acquire that lead from you. And so in a more complex system where you're purchasing leads and then reselling them, kind of the broker model, you'll have lead cost and lead price that is being factored into what that price would be ultimately. Of course, the system is set up so that you would not sell a lead at a loss. And so that's the idea there. Okay, not to get too delayed into that. Next, it's worth looking at this line item here, the accepted lead sources. So every filter set allows you to determine from which source you want that filter set to accept leads. So in this case, you'll see here that is listing out all of the sources that are available to me to select. And as a user, I would go through and decide which sources I would want for this. You can certainly select all or any combination. And so that is a handy tool, especially when you develop your strategy in terms of what sources and filter sets are going to be dedicated to each other. The line item below that is the lead delivery setup. This is an important one also to pay attention to, because it is the method by which the lead will be physically delivered to the recipient. So this partner has this filter set, and in this case, this drop-down menu gives you a number of different options for the format of the delivery. In this case, it's set up to be as an email delivery, and then you could then put in the email address that would be the target. You'll notice here that this plus below this allows you to set up additional delivery targets, and it's a sequential type setup. So the more you set up here, the first primary will be the delivery that goes first, and then subsequently below that, those deliveries will go. Elsewhere in the filter sets, there's additional rules that are worth looking at. For example, this exclusivity, just like it sounds, it is where you can determine if a filter set is only going to accept leads where it's going to be sold only to this partner, as opposed to shared leads where you're permitting this filter set to enable a purchase knowing that other partners in the system may be purchasing that lead. So that's really the difference between shared and exclusive leads. Of course, the price point would be different. And so chances are if you're dealing with those types of situations, you'll have one filter set up for exclusive leads and another one for the shared leads at different price points. Below that, the line items with regard to limits, just like what you would expect, is allowing you to put caps. Keep in mind that these caps are through this particular filter set for this partner. These wouldn't be across the entire partner account. So you can imagine if you had multiple filter sets within this partner's account, the limits would only be governing and tallying the leads that are matched through this particular filter set. So just bear in mind that those caps are very specific. Once you get past the limits, you do have some tools that are available to you with regard to scheduling when leads are going to match. So the idea here is that if you have a partner that only wants to receive leads during business hours, you could then set up a scheduling mechanism for what days and times leads would be accepted. So that way, outside of business hours, nothing would get sent to them. Right below that is an additional tool that complements that, and this is labeled when leads should not be posted. That is a way for you to choose dates to black out a certain date. So if you imagine somebody's on holiday, you would then be able to black out the date that no leads would go to. As you get below that, then you get into a lot of the filter settings regarding the content of the lead. So in other words, you'll notice here for state and zip, if this filter set were being designed to only accept leads from a certain state, so in this regard, by enabling it, you click that button. By clicking California and then deciding by zip code what you have to accept, you're saying that leads only that are from California with a specific list of zip codes would be matched through this filter set. So you have a lot of options with regard to filtering leads. As you'll see here, project, again, this is in the context of home improvement. So if you had a contractor that was only interested in receiving leads for certain types of projects, then this is where you would filter those leads based on that. Okay, that gives you at least a starting view of the filter sets. Once you click save, because remember we're adding a new one, it displays that new filter set here. One thing to notice is that these red buttons here indicating that these filter sets are not active. If you click on these buttons, you can actually turn the filter set on and off. And so that's worth paying attention to. By default, you'll notice a new filter set is in the off position. And so if you're ready for it to be ready for action, then you just need to turn it on. You notice a lot of components do have that on-off switch. So partner accounts have it as well. So if you look here, active, not active, those are interactive buttons as well. Okay. Having talked about filter sets, we'll look at the other side of partner accounts represented by this pencil icon. So we're going to go in and edit a new partner. Likewise, if you need to create a new partner, we do have these two buttons here. Very much like the source, add new source or wizards, we have the same idea here. But to get in to look at the details of a partner account, we'll go into an existing one here. You'll notice that when I click the pencil icon to enter the edit mode, we're offered a number of new tabs across the horizontal header here. We'll look at some of these, but then also there is on the left-hand side, these sub-tabs on the left. And these are all specific to this partner account that we're looking at. Just kind of be aware just in terms of the proverbial onion, so to speak, what layer you're at within an account or where you are in the system is always worth pointing out. Okay, so let's look at these horizontal ones real quickly across the top here. Obviously, contact information, not much to say here. It is exactly what it is, but you'll notice that there are some required fields. And if those aren't filled in, and I think we'll discover that if I try to save this, it's going to require me to fill in some of these fields. But the other tabs here, we'll look at account information. The HTML offer one is a very specific use case. Not many use that, but the account information is worth briefly looking at. This panel is mainly determining what your policies will be in regard to refunds. So think of this partner. There may be a situation where they want to request a refund on a lead that they received. This panel is where you will decide whether or not you will even allow them to request refunds. So for example, this line item here, by enabling this allows that partner to request refunds. In other words, it's leaving an option open to them in their partner portal where they're able to submit a request. Most of the other settings here are similar in the sense that it's kind of defining how you want to handle refunds. So it's worth taking a look at as you're contemplating your policies with regard to refunds. The next tab, the lead type settings. This is dealing with duplicates and how you're going to treat leads that are duplicates with regard to this partner's account. Pretty much what you're looking at here is straightforward. It's broken down by lead type. So for the home improvement lead type right now, we're not allowing any duplicates within the 30 days. These drop-down menus offer different time spans. And of course, the no check is available to you as well, that you would allow duplicates to go through. The next tab we'll look at is this lead limit settings. The cherry picker, that's a tool that's going to be phased out soon, I'm told. But the lead limit settings, again, are some additional limits or caps for leads. If you remember in the filter sets, we saw that there were some limits, and I explained that those were specific to that filter set. And if you were left wondering, well, is there a way to cap an account across the entire account? This is it. And it really has two ways you could do it. The total lead limits up here is just that across the entire account, regardless of the lead types. But then you'd see this limits here, where you can actually do some limits broken down by the lead type. So for home improvement, again, you have the way to break it down there. Okay, some other things to look at on the partner account management side of things. We have a good list of sub-tabs. Again, these are all specific to this partner account. Two that we'll look at that really are worth looking at. Not that these aren't important, but in terms of orientation, we're going to look at first the transactions tab. The main takeaway here, obviously, there's not a lot of transaction associated with this partner account because it's relatively new. But what you would normally see here is a listing of every transaction associated with this partner's account. So every lead that they purchase would be itemized here, and anytime that they've made a payment to you on their account, it would be reflected here. You probably noticed here at the top, there's the partner balance is being displayed. And this add new button allows you to either subtract or add payments. So in case they had a payment on their account, say for $100, when you add that transaction, it gets itemized here as a positive, and then their balance is adjusted. So there's this that's going on, and then there's this invoicing and billing sub-tab as well. And this is worth looking at because it is all related to that account balance that we were just looking at there. So the line item here for the credit limit, this is a handy tool because it really allows you to govern how you're going to handle the billing for your client. So in other words, what we're looking at here, the credit limit, we have the selection for limit the account at $100. And when you go back to the transactions tab, right now they're at a positive 100 balance. And this setting here is saying that even though it doesn't really show it, that it's allowing that balance to go below zero by $100. So right now, this partner at a positive 100 has $200 worth of lead buying available to them. Alternatively, no limit is just what it would sound. That account balance, again, that we're looking at here in transactions, can go below zero without any limit at all. And so most often we see that situation with our clients where they are then submitting an invoice for activities at the end of the month. And so then they just allow that balance to go below zero. Once that invoice is paid, then they get back to zero. Alternatively, going back, if you did want to limit the account and work in a cash positive type of environment, by leaving this at zero and leaving the limit the account, that means then when that partner's balance reaches zero, then they will no longer be allowed to purchase leads. And so that would be the alternative. In other words, that if they were prepaying for leads, like I was showing you just a moment ago, where you add that positive balance of $100 and then they purchase leads at, say, $5 a piece, after their account is depleted to zero, then they won't be able to purchase leads until they replenish it. So really two ways to attack it to handle how you're billing your partners. Going back again to this invoicing and billing tab, not only do you have this credit limit, but obviously there's a whole bunch of other tools available to you. Most of these are related to automation. So if you have a partner in your account that has a credit card on file that wants to have their credit card billed periodically, a lot of these automation tools are available to handle pretty much any scenario. So the remaining credit triggers, just like it sounds, when the balance reaches a certain threshold, then the credit card will be charged. Likewise, the rebill is more of a scheduled. You want to have recurring billing happen at a particular time of the month, then you can set it up as well. So most of the tools that you would have a need for with regard to automated billing should be available here. If you don't see something, then you have a specific use case that you need, certainly send us a ticket and we can give you our best advice there. Before we leave here, there's also these two tabs across the top. Invoice Manager, if you are producing invoices through the boberdoo system based on their activities, this would be the tool where you could set that up. We have a lot of clients that use this, but then we have probably just as many that are invoicing through, say, for example, QuickBooks. So in that regard, they're handling their invoicing outside the system. Okay. That covers the basics here. Obviously, there's a lot of these other sub-tabs that are worth looking at for all sorts of different reasons, depending on what your use case is. Some will be more useful than others. Definitely worth taking a chance or taking some time to look through that. One thing worth showing you, though, as we spoke about, your partners have a portal that they log into. And so when you hit this go to partner portal or partner admin, I'm sorry, this is a view of the portal that your partners can look at. And this is optional. You don't have to give them their login credentials, but if they are logging in, this is what they would be able to look at. And you'll notice that when we go back into our admin, there is the partner permissions. This sub tab here allows you to turn on and off various different sections in their portal. So it's showing a lot of these tabs here. It's worth showing you real quickly that you have that ability. I don't really know what the breakdown of our clients that use these portals are, but we do know that a good number of our clients are using it. And so, again, if you have questions about this, certainly send us a ticket. Okay, so that covers partners on the basic level there. And we talked about the sources. And so those are the main components in terms of getting a lead to successfully submit into the system and match to a partner. And so just to kind of review, you need to have a source, which is what we talked about, the pipeline that allows that lead to come in. Whether there's a vendor account that's associated with that is entirely up to you. But that is an option that remains available to you. Once that lead gets into the system through the source, boberdoo processes it and attempts to find a partner and a filter set that it can match to and ultimately sell to. In terms of making that successful sale, the required components, of course, you need an active partner account. So in other words, if you have partner accounts that are inactive, leads aren't going to be able to match to inactive accounts. And likewise with filters, you need to have a filter set that's active as well. And then, of course, not to state the obvious, having sufficient funds in that partner account is also required in order to get a successful sale. So at this stage in the presentation, we've talked about enough of the basics that if you're a brand new user to your system and you've been able to set up components as we've talked about, there's a handy tool that is worth showing new users because it really shows you how your system is working and it gives you a way to assess tweaks that you might need to make. So you notice I'm in a forms manager section of your system. And one of the sub tabs that's available is this one here, the manual entry form. And what this allows you to do is to submit a lead from within your system. And so when you get into the manual entry form, the first thing to do is to select what lead type you want to do this. I'll stick with the home improvement. It's what I'm most familiar with. And so this simply is a tool where you would then select whatever source you want and write on down through all the list of the fields that are being captured. You'll notice, just as a friendly tip, that some of these fields are in bold type. Those are the required fields in terms of this tool's required. The ones that aren't in bold aren't required. Likewise, none of this data gets validated, so you really just need to put some kind of a value in it. In this regard, a couple of these are at least format driven and need to be the right digits. So there's a zip code in the right format. The phone number needs to be the proper digits. And then the email needs to be at least in the right format. And so we'll answer some of these required questions. We'll say I usually use windows because I know that I will be able to match. And so what I've done is filled out this form, and when you click submit, the system will then process that potential lead, and then it shows you the immediate response. This is the result of submitting that lead. And there's a couple of things worth looking at here that are very handy to know. First off, this second line item here where it shows the status, it's showing a matched lead, and that's very good news. Not only was the lead successfully submitted into the system, if it were not successfully submitted into the system, that would show as a status of error. And that would mean that you have a lot of homework to do still in order to get that lead to get into your system. The other status that you might see would be unmatched. And that is better news in the sense that the lead successfully got into the system without an error. However, once in the system, the processing determined that there was no partner in your system that had a matching filter set that was able to accept that lead. So for example, the lead came in with, say, the state of California. None of your partners were accepting leads from the state of California, so therefore the lead went unmatched. In this case, the status is our third and best status. I guess if from the standpoint of success, it's a matched lead, which means that it was able to find a partner and sell to them. The other thing to notice here is the lead ID right below the status. In this case, lead ID number 115 is what we would look for in the system to analyze it further if we wanted to. So to do that, we would remove that. And then to look at your leads, you go to the Leads tab. And I often describe this section of your system kind of like Grand Central Station. It's where you're able to see all the comings and goings of your leads. And in this case, here is the lead that we submitted just a moment ago. It matched to 3 partners in my system here. You can see the prices that it matched and sold for. And it's a handy tool, that forms manager, that manual entry form, so that you're able to, as you're building a system, you can run a practice lead like that. And just see if you're getting the expected results that you're hoping for. There are some handy tools to show you here on the Leads tab since we're here. First one is, you'll notice in this section here, there's some tools that are available to you. The one that is probably most often used is the what we call the lead log. And when you click on the lead log, it gives you all of the activities that happened to this lead from the time that it was submitted. And the way lead logs are viewed, you'll notice that there's a timestamp for each activity, and it's actually going back in time. So if you wanted to look at the very first thing that happened to a lead, you go to the bottom and then you read your way up. So not to get really deep into the tech of this, but what you'll notice here is that when the lead was submitted, it was potentially matched up with these 3 buyers in the system. The system then looked at the prices that could be acquired for those leads and determined the various different logics that would identify how that lead would be treated. Ultimately, as you get through all of this processing, not to get too deep into this, you'll see that there was a webhook associated with this, but it's showing you the results that the post here to these partners. So we had MC squared, the Hound, HTML successful. That's showing that the post was successful. So that's the short view of lead logs. Very helpful when you're troubleshooting. You'll more often than not, you'll use the lead log if you have a situation of an unmatched lead. Another handy tool that is worth looking at is represented by this filter leads, not to be confused with filter sets, which uses the same button, but this is filtering leads in the sense of searching for leads in your system. So when you click on this button, what it does is opens up a panel, and it allows you to search for leads of a common identity, I guess you could say. So what you're looking at is, you could, if you knew the lead ID numbers of specific leads, you could search for it here. It takes lists of lead ID numbers if you want. If you know the phone number or the email, right on down the line, you can you get the idea of the various different ways you can search for leads. So for example, the search for one by source, if you were just to select, we want all leads from the, oops, didn't mean to do that, to filter that, and then you change the date range to go back. I have a feeling I don't have any leads. Okay, that was a bad example, but you get the idea. It allows you to search for subsets of your leads. But the takeaway here is that once you do that search of subset of leads, it allows you then to export that list of leads by determining whether you want to do it through an Excel format or not. So that was worth showing you there. Additional tools for analysis, since we're looking at leads tab is certainly an area where you'll start doing a lot of analysis of the performance of your leads. But we do have a report section that's worth showing. We have a main tab for that. In the report section, there is a lengthy library of reports. And the way that we name these reports are mainly to accommodate a keyword search. So if you have an idea that you want to look at some kind of a report related to profit, if you type in the word profit, it narrows down automatically the list of the reports that have profit in them. And so then you're able to read by various things, aspects of these reports. So if you want it by source or by date, all different ways to slice and dice numbers. So we have that library of reports that are available to you. One report that is different than the others, it's the admin leads report. This is worth showing you real quickly. The reason it's different is that when you generate this report, it's the only report that will produce all of the fields that comprise your lead types. And so we see a lot of our clients that want to get a subset of their leads and also get all the data from their leads. This report is a quick way to do that. And it's also the only report that right directly from the interface after you generate that report, it allows you to export it in these various different formats here. So it's a hand report that way. If any of these reports are pretty close, but not quite to what you need, we do have custom reports. Obviously this system doesn't have any, but if you send us a ticket, tell us which report is close but no cigar, tell us how we can make it better, and we'll create a custom report for you, which would then show in this section here. Additional features with our reports is that we have these timed reports. Think of it as a way of setting an alarm clock on a report so that on a daily interval or every other day, no matter what kind of schedule you needed, you could set up any of the reports, both custom or standard, as a timed report. So those are handy. Other handy tools that are worth showing as we are pressed for time, I know, but it is worth showing you, particularly if you have a tech background, the webhooks and notifications. If you go into your settings main tab, the last option in the subtabs is the webhooks and notifications. Your system will probably have a list that's similar to this of, as you can tell by these green check marks, active webhooks or notifications. So for example, you can see the name of this particular webhook is the daily limit reached by filter level. If you remember when we were looking at filter sets, we had the daily limits. This is a webhook that when that limit is reached, a notification will be sent. So for example, if we go into the edit mode of this webhook, you'll see that we're able to set it up as an email to go to the admin. That would be me, the operator of the system. And then the notification can be comprised of these various different magic strings. I know it's a really quick look at a webhook, but you'll get the idea. And so all of these are individual webhooks that have been set up at one time or another in this system. And yours will probably have some already going. This isn't the entire list. If you click on this add new webhook notification button, this is all of the webhooks that are available to you. It's a lengthy list, and chances are if you do have a need for a certain type of webhook or notification, definitely check this list. And otherwise, just like our reports, we can create custom webhooks for you if you don't find what you need here. All right. Okay, that covers most of the basics. Normally I'd open up for questions, but since this format is not live, we would certainly encourage you to send us tickets. And if you're not familiar with our ticket system, in the upper right section of your screen, no matter where you are in your system, we have the ticket system, and you're able to create new tickets, ask your question, or view existing tickets. As you can see here, a lot of tickets in this system, but the idea is once you see the ticket, you can either edit it and add comments to it and respond to questions that we might ask. But if you need to create a new ticket, you have the add new ticket button right here. And so you're able to ask us any question. And don't feel shy about a question not being worthy of being a ticket. That wouldn't be the case. We certainly would encourage you to ask any questions you have, particularly as you're starting out. Those questions, although they may seem insignificant, could make a huge difference in giving you that aha moment and getting you further along in your setup. So definitely take advantage of that. Other than that, I think that covers all the topics, and I appreciate your attention, and thank you for joining us.